Recently, I've been hearing a lot about the fear of God. I've been hearing about it in Sunday school, even at home in church, different places. And the first verse, when I think about the fear of God, that pops into my mind is Proverbs 9, verse 10. It says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So, from that verse, we can tell that a wise man should have the fear of the Lord. So the first wise man that I think of is Daniel. So I'm going to focus on what is the fear of the Lord, what do we do to express the fear of the Lord. So can we open to Daniel chapter 1, verse 5 to 8? Can someone read that? So, especially in verse 8, it says, Daniel determined not to defile himself, and along with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So, this stood out to me because Daniel and those 4 boys, they all chose not to take part in the king's table. They had food from the king's table, and there was no one around them to tell them, don't do that. There was no one around them to say no, but Daniel, he stood by what he learned, what he was taught, and did not defile himself. So because Daniel feared God, he did not follow the cultures of the world, he did not follow the people around him, and he didn't want to stray away from God by defiling himself. So that Daniel feared God in that situation. Another moment in Daniel's life where we could see the fear of God expressed is in Daniel chapter 6. This is the story when the officials, they wanted to find fault in Daniel, so they told the king to issue a decree where everyone would have to pray to the king, to King Darius, for 30 days. But Daniel, he chose not to pray to the king, but he chose rather to pray to God continuously as part of his daily routine. He did not alter his routine and follow what the law said. He followed what God said. What God said. He venerated and honored God. He respected God and put him above King Darius. He put him above the rulers of the world. Daniel at that time was close to the king, and he was one of the wise men that the king was very fond of. But Daniel, even though the king issued that decree, he did not seek the favor of the king, but continued to seek the favor of God. So just like that, we must also honor and respect God and put him above everything in our lives. Regardless of the world around us, whatever they may say, we should not follow what the world says. So firstly, we should not stray away from God. Secondly, we should venerate God and respect him and honor him. And finally, we should obey God. So for this portion, can we turn to Genesis chapter 22, verse 1 to 3? Can someone read that? So when reading this, when I read this, the words that stood out to me is in verse 3. It says, early next morning. So when Abraham received this message from God, he did not wait a couple weeks or a couple days for time to pass before he did it. He did not wait to see if God would change his mind in sacrificing his only son. He obeyed God instantly. Early next morning, it says, even though it hurt him, even though it didn't make sense to him, he obeyed God to that extent. Because of that, we should also obey God in everything that we do. We should not try to make our own way like Jonah did, where he went to Nineveh instead of obeying what God said. We should obey instantly what God says and obey it to the full extent. So, firstly, we should not stray away from God. Secondly, we should venerate and honor God in everything that we do. And thirdly, we should obey God. May God bless you with these